Hey everyone, welcome to the Learning Network. You're with Kell Bell. This particular course will take you through embedding wellbeing in community and family studies and the importance of getting it right from the beginning in Year 11 to really filter into Year 12. This particular course is for experienced CAFS teachers, as well as those newbies who are teaching the course in their first 5 years. Also, this might even be important for CAFS students and also teachers who are ready to take their CAFS crew to the next level. Getting wellbeing right from the beginning is so crucial. Wellbeing is like the umbrella of our course. Everything really links back to wellbeing. And in a past life, in a previous exam specifications model, pre-2010, our students had to link all of their answers back to wellbeing for groups in context and for parenting and caring, as well as their options. So this is something that's been part of the course for a really long time. It stemmed from life management, which is the course before community and family studies. So it does really have a really rich historical perspective within the whole course, but also when we really think about it, our whole course is based around wellbeing, based around the resources, about the needs and wants that individuals might have, and the different government and community organisations that might be out there to support people's wellbeing. So this really needs to be done right from the very beginning, really strongly with the students. So having a really strong start from the beginning is going to set your students up for success. Now, we know that the 6 aspects of wellbeing include social, physical, emotional, economic, cultural, and spiritual wellbeing. And these 6 aspects are the factors that affect an individual, group, or community or family's wellbeing. And what the students really need to show well is that interrelationship between each of the factors. The factors don't function on their own. Our well-being is definitely impacted by the other factors. If our physical well-being isn't being met, then we're going to be highly emotional, or we might not get enough sleep. It's going to then impact us the next day, where we might feel really aggravated or agitated. So this has a really good connection, not just for an individual, but for groups and communities as well. So it's really important for the students to really know that interrelationship right from the very beginning. Now, the importance of the rubric here is really about the option rubric for the HSC. This is where the students also need to shine and show their really good understanding of wellbeing, even in the HSC. So the importance of sharing this rubric with the kids from the beginning, I think needs to really happen in Year 11. I think in the past, we often kind of wait until the trials or just before that, or if there's an assessment task on the option, we kind of mention it then, but I think we really need to be more meaningful, more purposeful, and showing the students right from the very beginning. So I'm talking even in Year 11, showing the students the rubric of what it might look like in Year 12 and what they need to link their questions to or their answers to in the HSC itself. They need to show and see that significance right from the very beginning. The rubric, there's a particular dot point about wellbeing. We need to make sure the students are very, very aware of this because this will set them up for success from the beginning. And there are other parts of this rubric as well. The students need to know these aspects, and we can't just take advantage of it. We need to really show the students and make it really explicit that this rubric is really what the whole foundation of Part C in our HSC exam is about. And then obviously, hand in hand with our rubric will go the marking guidelines. So showing the students past marking guidelines from the NESA website or possibly trial examinations in the past, showing that to the students and getting them to really have a good understanding that this aspect of wellbeing is embedded into each of those aspects in our higher marks. The students really need to be shown that they need to have a good understanding of wellbeing for Part C in their option. They really need to discover what it takes to actually get some good marks in this particular question in the exam. So Part C is so important to link back to wellbeing. And of course, the kids need to develop ways to actually understand this. And we need to model this with the students and really teach them explicitly what it takes to get those higher marks in this particular part of the exam. Once the students see this and you show them the way, they will develop a deeper understanding of wellbeing. We really need to be spending a number of lessons on wellbeing in Year 11 and touching on it all the way through to Year 12 especially in our option. So showing that connection between the aspects is highly important. That interrelationship is really, really key here. And of course, the students need to demonstrate this connection in every paragraph, not just at the end of their answer or just a throwaway comment about well-being. It must be embedded into each of the aspects they talk about in their answers in the Part C for the HSC. And of course, their examples need to be really unique, really explicit, and related to their context. They need to stand out. They also need to make sure that they're really linking back to these ideas that are in the question, and their example should filter in through here. So in terms of Part C, well-being is going to be embedded where applicable. So it's only in Part C now, or unless it's stated in the question, the students do not have to relate back to well-being in all parts of their answers for the rest of the HSC. So as I mentioned, in the past, they had to talk about well-being in all of their answers for groups in context, parenting, and all three questions for the option. They now only have to do it for Part C, or unless the question states it. So we're talking about specs here, or speaks. So the 6 aspects of well-being, or the 6 factors that affect well-being. Again, the students need to be really, really specific. It can't be a flyaway comment. This impacts on an individual's emotional well-being. That's simply not enough. It needs to be really specific. They need to articulate it. And variety is the key. Lots of different examples. Showing that positive and or negative impact is also highly important. And really, that connection between the concepts, so that connection between, say, social and physical well-being, or emotional and physical well-being, cultural, spiritual, whatever connection you're going to make, you really need to show that relationship. And really, that relationship is kind of like analyzing. Analyzing is really about identifying the components. So, speaks, we have those different components of well-being. There are 6 components of well-being. The next stage of analyze is really looking at the relationship or the connection between each of those aspects. So the connection between each of the 6 aspects, or it might just be a couple. The student should be really thinking about the link to well-being where applicable. And this idea about relationship is really like analyze. And that last little part of analyzing something is about that implication. So really this part about well-being in our option in Part C is kind of really showing the marker that the students have a good understanding that there are connections between these aspects of well-being. It's going to have both a positive and or negative impact on the individual, on the group, on the family, or on the community within that particular question. So we have our 6 aspects of well-being. So SPECS or SPEAKS is our acronym, and this impacts need to really relate back to the question. It has to be really specific, and the markers are going to look for that in students' responses. It needs to be really articulate in the students' responses which aspects of well-being that this particular question might be related to. And it's not going to say that in the question itself. The students have to think really critically of how this might impact on well-being. Once the students see this, you will see a massive change in their results. Once they see the significance of well-being right from the very beginning in Year 11 and why we actually focus on it so much, they're going to thrive, and you're going to show them the way through the examples, through the modelling and the exemplars that you give to the students and explore with them in class. You must be really wondering though, what is the actual significance of embedding wellbeing in Part C? And I know from teaching CAFS for 16 years and being involved in writing and presenting and working with you guys and working with students, it's often the missing ingredient. I see it. Some of us don't see that connection, and it's just simply not knowing. But to me, this is what guides us. It's the exam rubric. So this is from the NESA 2019 HSC, and it pertains to Part C for our option questions. So in our HSC CAFS exam, we have 2 parts. So Section 1 and Section 2. Section 1 has Part A, our multiple choice, so 20 multiple choice. They also have Section 1 Part B, our short answers, 55 marks. And then we have our Section 2. And our Section 2 is based around just one option. either family and societal interactions, social impact of technology, or individuals and work. And this particular part of the paper is worth 25 marks. And often it's been a breakdown of a 4 marker, so a bit lower order, a 6 marker, middle order, like a describe or an explain or an examine, and then finally a 15 marker, which the students are going to use lots of critical thinking and really link it back to wellbeing for that 15 marker. There has been one instance where there's been 2 10 markers and a 15 marker, but that's just been one instance. So typically it is a 4, a 6, and a 15. And this 15 marker for Part C is going to be written in a separate booklet. Part A and B is often in the same booklet, but again, the students are going to really write their number and show their particular section. So, Part A, question 30, whatever it might be. So really indicating to the marker what they're answering in that booklet. So for Part C, it is in a writing booklet, and we're kind of looking at between 4 to 6 writing booklet pages. So it's not just a short answer question. And I can tell you the number of times that my students have not really shown their understanding and not really used that length as a guide, it's really affected their results. So we're talking, getting 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 marks. And they haven't been using those spaces because this is where the students really shine. They get to shine. It's 15 marks. Trying to get to 15 marks in a page doesn't really match up. And we really need to be reminding the students of this. So let's go back to the exam rubric itself. So the students are going to use this exam rubric, and it's at the beginning of the option, and it's there every year. Students will be assessed in Part C on how well they actually demonstrate knowledge and understanding of societal influences on well-being. Here's that part about well-being. It has to be relevant to the question. Here's where the rubric tells us that they're going to be assessed on well-being. It's the cornerstone concept to our course. It's the umbrella of which all the other aspects of our course sits under. They're going to be assessed on it. They then apply the skills of critical thinking and analysis. Of course, higher order questions like critically analyze, critically examine, critically assess or evaluate. Often those sorts of glossary of keywords are used for our Part C. So getting the students to really have a good understanding about these extensive glossary of keywords is highly, highly important. We also have the students communicating ideas and information using lots of relevant examples, really unique, really different, outside the box, and they're going to present their answer in a logical and really cohesive manner. So really, really clear, there's a method to it. We need to show this to the kids. We can't just assume that they know what this is about. And let me tell you, with having conversations with many even experienced CAFS teachers, and some of them who are even HSC markers, they aren't really aware of this. They kind of just take it for granted. They don't really realise that it's so embedded into our course for Part C. We need to share this rubric with the students from the beginning. And I'm suggesting actually even in Year 11, showing them the HSC, they really need to kind of know where they're headed. Begin with the end in mind. Show them in Year 11 so they really know that this is going to be assessed all the way through the course, even at the end in that grand finale, which is the HSC. So sharing the rubric with the students is my suggestion. So they know from the beginning when you teach wellbeing, this is what it might look like in the HSC. Now, breaking down each aspect, really looking at this rubric and going, okay, I really need to have all these bits. I can't just, have really good impact on wellbeing and not be really structured or not have a really good foundational knowledge and understanding of the course or having those, glossary of keywords really addressed. I need to know what each of those aspects are because I need to bring it all together. We need to show the students what it actually takes. We can't just assume it. And I think for too long, we often think the students are going to copy or going to just base their answers on exemplars or, maybe even the responses that we write. But showing them what it takes, this rubric is so important. And of course, the big thing is actually putting it all into practice. We need to model it. Once we model it and lead the kids on the right path, they're going to follow us and they're going to follow this recipe to success. And that is really about what this Part C is. There is a method. There is some method behind this. So this part about societal influences is really kind of about all the different things that might be outside of the individuals or groups or families' control that impacts on their well-being. So we're talking about maybe the community's attitude towards something, maybe gender expectations. There might be life opportunities or experiences, that sort of thing. Maybe socialization, so how they're brought up. That difference between males, females, that sort of thing, masculinity, femininity within those gender expectations, maybe norms and conformity, so rules and regulations, accepted practices, those sorts of things. And then, of course, media stereotypes. These are all societal influences on well-being, and we'll definitely see those filtered through in our Part C for our option. Of course, we're looking at specs. So there's 6 factors that affect well-being. Okay, so we have social, physical, economic, emotional, cultural, and spiritual. And again, this impact will either be positive and or negative. And it's okay to be equally weighted or for maybe to be a bit more positive or a bit more negative. There's no right or wrong here. As long as they're showing some sort of impact, then it's completely okay. So in terms of critical thinking and analysis, we're really thinking about really, I suppose, harder kind of concepts, deeper thinking, higher order skills, using glossary of keywords to actually guide the response. So often, typically, it might be critically analyze, critically examine, critically assess, or critically evaluate, possibly. And this is the way that it's moving a little bit in terms of the exam question is to what extent, which is really about a judgment. So making a judgment. You might also see some discuss questions in our Part C, but it's really higher order glossary of keywords. And that's going to guide you in terms of how the students are going to respond to it. So that interrelationship is really important. That connection is super, super clear all the way through. And again, as I mentioned, it's often some sort of assessment, evaluate. They're higher order glossary of keywords. We really want the students to be able to communicate their ideas in a really logical and coherent manner, but they need to show some really good examples to back that up. So it has to be specific to the question. It can't just be random. It can't just be, a little bit connected to the content. It has to be really unique and varied. We want the students to think outside the box. We want them to think big picture that are non-typical to what we might see. They need to use lots of different examples, maybe examples from their own context, maybe examples from their own family and or community to really show and display what this might look like. So textbook examples are all well and good, but we need to remember that we need to diversify. We need to show to the markers that the students have a really good, broad understanding, as well as really specific examples to back up their ideas. So using really specific examples for the student to be able to demonstrate really good knowledge and understanding throughout is so important. And all these ideas should be presented in a logical, so it needs to be in some sort of order and it needs to make sense. So the glossary of keyword will guide us in terms of how we respond to this. A discuss is going to look very different to what an analyze is. And if you'd like to know more about those glossary of keywords, I also have another free training available to you guys. If you want to simply send me a message, I can provide that training for you, that link to the training. But the glossary of keyword will actually guide the students. So if it's a discuss, we're going to look at both positive and or negative and the implications of those. If it's analyze, they're going to identify the components, show that relationship, and then show the implication of that relationship. Again, it's a different skill. The students need to show that and present their answer in lots of different ways. Of course, the students have to have a clear paragraph structure all the way through using PEEL, TEAL, SEXY, whatever acronym you use, but it's structured. And often for our Part C, there is a clear introduction. There are a number of PEEL paragraphs in their answer, and then there's also a conclusion. And I often compare this to, say, like a society and culture essay or a modern history or a business essay. Even some of our drama essays, that sort of thing. It's not a short answer. It's not a couple of pages long. This is very, very extensive. And I really think that many people across the state, across New South Wales, including teachers who have taught the course, aren't really aware of how extensive it really needs to be. We're talking 4 to 6 pages of content, of showing and demonstrating understanding. All right, so it needs to be really, really cohesive But it also needs to show and demonstrate the student's understanding and lots of good evidence of understanding. Students need a direction, and that's our job. That's our job to provide them with that direction. Once we show them the way and once we put all these pieces together, they're going to have so much more success. They're going to thrive, and we need to really provide them with that clear direction. And I know that some of us don't know this clear direction, and that's exactly what this training is about, showing you a really clear way to help the kids with Part C, because often Part C is the hardest part of our exam. And as I mentioned before, I think it's a missing ingredient. Teaching CAFS for 16 years, presenting across New South Wales for about 10 years, and working with students in lots of different ways with, exam practice, with HSC enrichment days, with study sessions for lots of organisations, as well as with all of my students across the time. I know this is a missing ingredient. And Part C is where we can really get the student to show their understanding. We need to share this opportunity with the kids. Share it and don't keep it to ourselves. We need to be able to break it down, show them in lots of different exemplars, then annotate those exemplars. And of course, the biggest thing is practice, 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 not just for the kids, but also for us to really kind of get it in our head. This is what it's going to look like. So let's have a look now at these three options. So family and societal interactions, we might be talking about the impact of wellbeing, both positive and or negative. And because of the context in which our option is based around, it might be the impact on children, or it might be the impact on young people, adults, or age. It just depends on what the question is actually asking. So let's have a look at a typical HSC style question. This one's from 2019. And as we can see, there's no link to wellbeing in our question itself. But we just need to take for granted it's always going to be related back to wellbeing. So the question evaluate the effectiveness of government legislation supporting and protecting the welfare of children is our question. So we might set up a little intro. We might then have a number of different paragraphs that really look at the government legislation. In each of those paragraphs, we need to link back to wellbeing of how this actually impacts on the welfare of children. Okay, this is where we actually need to show that understanding of wellbeing. Now, let me show you the actual marking guidelines. I've indicated here the 2 points that really link to wellbeing. You'll see in the 10 to 12 mark range that the point is provides a link, just a very brief link, to the effect on the wellbeing of children. So if they have everything good, they have really thorough knowledge, they've got judgments in there because the question is evaluate. They need to show judgments throughout their response. They also have that link to wellbeing, and they're going to communicate that really well using lots of examples, and it's really cohesive. See how this actually includes wellbeing? So they might have a really good response, but no wellbeing in there at all. They can only ever get a 7 to 9. They might have really good content. They might know their syllabus, but they're missing the missing ingredient. They're missing that link to wellbeing. And I'm going to tell you now, there's lots of people across the state who aren't aware of this. So now that you guys know this secret, let's share it with the kids. You'll see in that 13 to 15 mark range, the link is a lot clearer. Okay, so it provides a clear link to the effect on the wellbeing of children. It's going to be in multiple ways. It's going to be in lots of their paragraphs. They have really good knowledge. It's extensive. They've got really clear and valid judgments. This link to wellbeing is really clear, and there's lots of links to the impact of wellbeing for the children. Again, their ideas are communicated, really relevant examples, and it's logical, it's cohesive. So this is the big thing here. This is the takeaway for you guys. You need to get the students to link to wellbeing in each of the paragraphs. As soon as wellbeing is in there and the content is good, they can sneak into that 10. If there's no wellbeing at all, so no link to needs or no links to support or maybe resources, that sort of thing, they need to link to wellbeing. As soon as it's in there and as soon as they've got the good content, it can go into that 10 to 12. No wellbeing, it's only ever going to get a 7 to 9. Of course, unless it does that. That's really important to show this to the kids. Let's look at another example. Again, social impact of technology, positive and or negative impact. And the impact might be, because of the content, might be individuals, groups, might be families in relation to how they use technology. It might be communities in relation to health or transport, possibly. Maybe workplaces. There's a whole section on workplace technology, but also the employers and employees within those workplaces. Again, this is a 2019 exam, so analyse the economic and ethical effects of emerging technologies on the community. So here the students are really showing that good connection between these aspects and what the actual effect is in terms of economic and ethical effects. Of course, they need to be talking about emerging technologies, as well as linking it back to wellbeing. It doesn't say wellbeing in the question, but we know now from the exam rubric and from the marking guidelines that they must include wellbeing. And again, here it is here. We can see clearly in that 10 to 12, the effect on the wellbeing of the community is that big point there. If you want to sneak into that 13 to 15 mark range, the kids are going to have a clear link to the effect on the wellbeing of the community. Guys, this is so crucial here. This is a light bulb, and hopefully this has made sense to you. And hopefully you're starting to see of how you might actually improve your students' results by really being explicit here with this. Again, individuals and work, positive, negative impact, communities, groups, families, individuals, employers, employees. Another question, 2019, analyze the possible effects on a family when one member of the family changes their pattern of work due to social factors. Wellbeing, wellbeing, wellbeing. It's all in here. It doesn't state it. And I think that's part of the missing ingredient, that often we don't tell this explicitly to the kids. They don't know what they don't know. So this is really important for them to have an understanding that they need to link back to wellbeing in Part C. So again, the marking guidelines here provides a link to the effect on the wellbeing of the family. Again, that needs to be explicit to the family, not just the individual within the family itself. And then if they're providing a clear link to the effect on the wellbeing of the family, it's going to sit in that 13 to 15. Again, wellbeing is so crucial here. It needs to be embedded. And the structure of the response itself should actually do this. Each paragraph must address the impact or the effect on the wellbeing, either both positive and or negative, for say the individual or the group or the family or the children or the young people or the adults. Whatever the question is about, it needs to link back to the wellbeing of those people. The students also need to have an understanding of wellbeing relevant to the question. There's no point in talking about spiritual wellbeing if they're talking about the workplace and how their rights and responsibilities link to that. Okay, it needs to link back to the question itself. So getting the students to be really explicit and their link to wellbeing is crucial. Again, their examples are going to link back to the question. Keep going back to that. Guys, I hope this has been so useful, and you're starting to see possibly a shift that your students are going to make in their results right from the very beginning, not just before the Year 12 trials, but from Year 11, how we can start showing the students this link to wellbeing all the way through to Year 12. Once you see the shift, the kids are going to thrive. So let's recap. There are 3 big challenges. We often focus on content. We're very content heavy. We forget to really link this back to wellbeing. We might address it really briefly. The students often in the HSC, when we see and have a chat to them about their exams, that sort of thing, we often see this. And even in their trials, we see this. They're focusing so much on content, they really forget to link it back to wellbeing. And if their answer is so good, but there's no wellbeing at all, they can only ever get a 9 out of 15. And I want you guys to have a look at your RAP data from the last couple of years, so the last 5 years. See if you can have a look at the Part C, what mark they got. And you can also see the average across the state is significantly low. We're talking 5, 6, 7 is the average, and it has been the average for a number of years for Part C. Guys, this is why. We're not being challenged by this. We're not getting the kids to really focus on their aspects of wellbeing for Part C. And again, the missing ingredient here is that often our students' examples are way too generic. They need to be really explicit. They need to link back to the question. But Now that you guys have done this training, you'll know that these are the 3 big strategies that I've introduced to you. Using the marking rubric right from the very beginning and filtering it through all the way through to Year 12. Using it in Year 12 when we look at the option, as well as when we do any exam preparation for our option, is really important. We know now that we need to embed wellbeing throughout our option. So not just tacking it on and not just kind of going, okay, here's all the content. And then when you get a question, you might link it to wellbeing. Every teaching and learning activity we do, there should be an opportunity for the students to demonstrate their understanding and how that particular dot point impacts on the well-being of the individual, group, family, or community. I want you guys to be using that, doing that with the students. And of course, making those explicit connections to the relevant aspects of well-being is something that we really need to push. So possibly having a table like of content. If it's a table about, say, legislation, we might look at the legislation, examples, descriptions. We might then have a column next to that which has the impact, positive, negative, and of course then the impact on well-being. That's the sort of thing we should be doing. We can't just expect the kids to know this. Guys, once you start doing this with your students, they are going to absolutely love it. You're going to see this big picture. You're going to see all the pieces of our course really come together. I love Part C in our HSC exam. I love teaching the option because it really is getting the students to think about broader concepts in our community and in our families and bringing and drawing back into our course right from Year 11. Lots of those concepts really relate in our options to the Year 11 course, and getting it right from the very beginning is something that I very much advocate. Guys, it is going to take time. There's never like a checklist. It's always going to be a bit tricky, but breaking it down for the students is highly important. There needs to be a step-by-step process, but of course, that transformation is not going to happen overnight. I want to ask you guys now, if you had the time, what would you actually do differently? If you had the time again, how would you teach the option, possibly well-being, or this idea about using Part C as a cornerstone for the links to well-being? What would you do differently? So this is the pathway. This is what we've covered today. So well-being is going to be taught explicitly from Year 11. We're going to show those interrelationship between each aspect in Year 11 all the way through to Year 12. Of course, demonstrating and modelling this to the student is really important, showing them that connection. Showing the students the option rubric really early, I'm talking Year 11, and showing them the marking guidelines that go with it and how they need to actually link back to wellbeing in each of their paragraphs of the option. Again, model, really showing the students what it takes. So sharing different exemplars, annotating them, and seeing how particular responses are embedding wellbeing right from the very beginning. And of course, then back to the kids. They need to have constant checking for meaning and understanding along the way, making sure they're covering these aspects all the way through. So we're modeling it, we're practicing it, we're then getting feedback on this. Now, what difference do you think this might make to your students? And those students who are watching, what difference would it make for you guys in your HSC, in your journey for CAFS? Let's recap. 3 big challenges. Focus on content. Let's move away from that. We have to have the knowledge and understanding there. We have to have really extensive knowledge and understanding. But we also need to link this to wellbeing as well. Often wellbeing is addressed really briefly. Let's up our game here and let's really improve our examples to make sure they're really unique and varied all the way through. Guys, once we start to see these changes, the students are going to feel so much more confident. They're going to work with you. You're going to have some really good results with your kids, not just in their trials, but in the HSC. They're going to have so much more success. The process is about breaking it down, teaching the wellbeing explicitly. That's the first stage. Sharing the rubric with the kids, embedding our wellbeing all the way through our option, and getting the students to practice these explicit links multiple times all the way through, not just in Year 12 when it comes to the option or it comes exam time, but from Year 11. Guys, if you have any questions about this particular aspect, please don't hesitate to reach out. Please send me a message. I'd love to have this conversation to continue with you guys. And look, I'd love for you to join the community. You can find me at thelearnnet.com. That's our website. Or you can head over to Facebook. The handle there is the Learn Network. Or if you're an Instagram sort of person, at the LearnNet. And then we also have a private Facebook group, and you can head over using that link there. But of course, at any point, anything related to community and family studies, please don't hesitate to reach out and send me an email at kelly@thelearnnet.com. Guys, I really hope this session has been fantastic. If you would like to focus on this with your students, or if you would like to dig a little bit deeper, I'd be more than happy to connect with you and join you in one of my coaching and mentoring sessions. Guys, thank you so much. Good luck and enjoy.